Good evening. I hope to do a little bit of what the Vietnam Air War was about, or as the official title was, Rolling Thunder, which was the bombing of the North. Oops, too fast. First, I want to give honor to these two gentlemen they were in my same wing that got the Medal of Honor for their individual actions over in North Vietnam. This is one of the logos for the Wild Weasels. It was first in, last out. And as we get through this, you'll understand what I'm saying, and maybe a little bit better. I owe part of this slide presentation to Lieutenant Colonel Stan Goldstein, who was in Washington, D.C., who was one of the early Wild Weasels. Rolling Thunder was the air campaign over North Vietnam that started in 1965 and ended in '68. But that's a bad date, '68, because it really didn't end. They just changed the name of what we were doing. There were no clearly defined military objectives. Targets selected by the White House, Johnson himself. And we flew about 20,000 F-105 sorties during the period. 992 aircraft losses, 40% were F-105s. Almost 400 105s were shot down or destroyed over North Vietnam. And it wasn't because the aircraft didn't have performance. Okay, my prelude going before I went to Thailand into the air war. I was commissioned as a navigator, went through flight school in Harlingen, Texas in 1959. I then went to Keesler Air Force Base for electronic warfare school. And my first assignment was at Stewart Air Force Base in New York in 1960. There I was flying EB-57s, and our role then was to test all the fighter squadrons and how to intercept under an adverse condition, and also to test the ground radar sites to operate under a electronic condition. Have you all heard static in your radios and wonder why and what? Well, what we're talking about here is intentionally giving radar signals into the radios or the radars to deny them their use. That's what it was all about. In December '63, I got orders to the 317th Fighter Sector Squadron in Elmendorf Air Force Base, Alaska. A great assignment. There I flew T-33s, C-130s in support of Greenland. We went from Alaska across northern Canada into Greenland and supported the radar sites in the middle of Greenland. F-102s was the main thing in the squadron I was in. There's the airplane that I flew, and we were putting on a show. We normally did not do a dual engine start, but the starter cartridges sort of black smoke. On my way to Southeast Asia, I made an agreement with a couple of senior generals. They sent me back through pilot training to complete, providing I would be an electronic warfare officer in Southeast Asia and not checked out as a pilot. So I made that agreement. In Arizona, I flew T-33s and T-38s for a little while. Up in Alaska on special holidays and everything, we had what we called the Unholy Four. As you can see, the B-57 led, a 102 and a 106, and the T-33 in the back. And that was the air show for the people in southern Alaska at the time. And we did it several times, and it was a lot of fun. There we go, Rolling Thunder. There's a B-57. The B-57 is the best airplane for ground support to the Army. It could loiter for 4 hours and carry a very large bomb and ammunition load. Unfortunately, I wasn't flying them. Here's a little definition of Rolling Thunder. It's basically the airstrikes up over North Vietnam from 1965 through '68. that just defines what was going on or some of the information that took place there and why and what were there.
This is the 105 story, the story of pilots flying over the Red River Valley in the heartland of North Vietnam. Beyond this river barrier, a great concentration of hostile weapons awaits the arrival of Air Force fighter bombers. Any mission north of the Red River requires a special courage known only to the men who must fly again and again into the area until they reach the magic number 100.
Here's some of the planes that were over there, what base. The 104, of course, we all have heard about. And while I was there, 104 was basically a top cover looking for MiGs. They did do a lot of bombing on their own, but the 105 was the major bomb carrier. And they tried to restrict the 105 from dropping their bomb loads and going after the MiGs. The Sandys, the A-1Es. As far as I'm concerned, there was no better airplane in the world. Anytime there was a pilot shot down, they went in to sterilize the area around, make sure it was safe before they called the choppers in to pick up the down airmen. A lot of them were lost, but they took a lot of high risks and they really were great. While I was there, any A-1E Sandy pilot that came to our base never had to buy a drink. There's one of the planes I flew. That was a B-66E model. No, excuse me, that's a C model. You can tell the difference. Whoops. By the pods on the wing, those were ADF pods for zeroing in. The C model was mostly used for finding where the radar sites was and plotting them so we could pass it off to intelligence. Here's a 105 with the bomb load, centerline bomb load, centerline, 2 fuel tanks. Most of our missions with the 105 and 66, we take off from, I'll show you from Takhli, refuel over Laos, go and hit the targets, come back out and refuel over Laos. The 105 and high performance burned jet fuel that was unreal. There's a definition of what the 105 was. You notice 26,500 pounds of thrust in the engine and afterburner. Our only internal was a 20mm Gatling gun internal in the nose, and all the rest was external stores. In its original configuration, the 105 was designed as a nuclear bomber, and the bomb was carried internally in the bomb bay. The 105 came out in the 53s after Korea, several airplanes did, and just didn't find a home. But they were used in the Cold War. 105 sat alert over in Germany until Southeast Asia cooked off. There's some other patches that we all wanted. Completion of 100 missions over North Vietnam. That was a big day. The second part of it, we were going home. Now, many of us went over there to start on 80 missions in 8 months, and you can go. Then they changed that, says you can go on 100 missions. Then they changed that and says you'll be there all year. But the 100 mission pass was still, everyone wanted one. This is a little bit of Vietnam. The red line depicts part of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I'm sure you've all heard of everything that came down from the north via the Ho Chi Minh Trail into various different parts of South Vietnam. One of the major passes, this was a big mountain pass here, as we would hit almost every night with major bombs. And what else? The Vietnamese would get wise and they'd park underneath the trees so you couldn't see them. So we started bombing the trees. It was a cat and mouse game. From the JCS standpoint, Vietnam was divided into 6 different bombing areas. The ones in the lower numbers were the easiest. When you get up into 6A and 6B, that's where you had all your problems. 6B was basically assigned to the Navy. The Air Force had 6A, and there wasn't much out in 5. The MDN flew was right up in here, if you remember that, in 1954 with the French. So these were the counters everybody wanted. Missions up into there. Whoops. There's a little bit closer definition of it. It also outlines some of the buffer zones where we were not allowed to go. The buffer zone with China, and believe it or not, there was a zone around Haiphong and over Hanoi that we were not allowed to bomb. So you think the war was one-sided? This is the base I was at, but this was taken in 1965. The 105s here were just temporary. They were rotating in from Okinawa and from Japan. We did not have permanent F-105s at the time. This is pulling a jet engine out of a 105 and replacing it. Over in Thailand, they were able to do that in half the time that it was done in the States because of the urgency and needing for the airplanes. This is loading some of their 3,000-pound bombs. The 105 could carry between 12 and 14,000 pounds of ordnance. This was the same base where I was at when I got there in 1967. A little bit busier, a lot more aircraft. There's another shot, but this is one of Parat, which was basically our sister for the F-105s. And on this side, you got 105 downwind getting ready to land. These are some of the enjoyment things that were early in during the war in the 65 and 66. That's a 20-man life raft that became the swimming pool. And you can just see, just relax. If you weren't flying, you wanted to relax as much as you can because of the tense system flying.
Roscoe was brought here by a pilot from Kadena who was temporarily assigned to the wing. When the pilot was shot down up north, Roscoe sort of became everybody's dog. The only dog allowed on base. Now Roscoe's a free agent and goes everywhere. Sort of a tramp with a big heart. But lots of guys, for instance, don't feel right unless he's sitting there in a commander's chair during the mission briefing. They say if he sleeps, it's going to be an easy mission. If his ears perk up, watch out.
This is the Officers Club menu, and if you notice the prices, one thing it doesn't say is we all learned a phrase over there, no half. You go and order something, and the Thai waitresses, which were teenage girls, all daughters of the Thai officers on the other side of the base. And some of them spoke fairly good English, but the key word was no half. They didn't have it, even though it's on the menu. When the containers of food came in, everybody went to get their favorite meal because they know it would be there for a few days. You notice the cheap prices? These are some of the homes we have. There were bungalows, some left over from World War II. They had been retrofitted to some degree with cubicles and air conditioning, but not a whole lot. Later on, we had cement buildings. The one I finally lived in had 6 bedrooms, 2 men to a bedroom, and 2 bedrooms to a bathroom. Outstanding air conditioning. And why I'm pointing this out, that was mostly the uniforms we wore, camouflage, flight suits, but the important thing was that hat. everybody coveted and wore that hat. That was a standard uniform hat. And the thing that was important, I don't know if you can see it, right around the brim are markings. Black ones were for non-color emissions, and red ones that counted were for color emissions. And you saw somebody and you didn't know their name, you could tell how long they'd been there by the number of marks they had in their hat. So that was a real status symbol. That's me in front of our office on one of the few days we wore a uniform. We didn't wear that because we didn't have the best facilities to clean it, but we did have facilities. This is what camaraderie was. Everybody tried to eat together, live together, and laugh together. That's a B-66 model that I flew. We had 22 electronic systems on board. We were capable of jamming every radar the North Vietnamese had. We could put out a whole lot of power. And our role was we went up before the strike force went and laid down a pattern of electronics to jam all the radars. So the strike force could get in as best as possible to lay down their bombs on the target and get out. There were certain radars that we'll show later. The SAM radars were highest priority, because those are the ones that control the missiles. Then you had early warning radars, and then you had height finders that we jammed also. So that's what it was all about. And we had 48 B-66s at that base. That's the washing machine. In our bungalow, she was a hooch girl, Thai, that every day cleaned the bungalow, made the beds, and did the laundry every day. And we would give her money to go downtown and buy us fruit. Because if we went downtown, it would cost us a lot more than her. So she would bring it up to us every day. Now, on heavy days of laundry, she had an assistant. And that's the way to wash it, in a bucket of water and on the concrete. Be amazed how nice it came out, though. They were loading 750 pound bombs on our center line of the F-105s. They had fuel tanks on the wings that you saw before. We dropped a whole lot of bombs, more than we bombed all of Europe in World War II. That's a 3,000 pound bomb. They're loading it again. When you get close to it, you realize how big that bomb really is. Okay, this is Wild Weasel. He's got ordnance on there to go after the radars. The Wild Weasel led the F-105s in by about 5 minutes, looking for the SAM radars, and they had specific munitions, like the Standard Arm and the Shrike, to launch after and lock on to the missile sites. The problem was early in the war, the North Vietnamese discovered that they turned the radar off, our missiles went blind, and that's what they were doing. We did get a lot of their sites though. Here they are loading the 20 millimeter into the 105, and they're also downloading all of the cartridges. The 105 did not dispel the empty cartridges into the airstream for fear that it would go into the air intakes and kill the engine. So they captured all the cartridges and downloaded here, as you're seeing. We had about 19 seconds of ammunition on the 105 if he's fully depressed. This is getting ready for mission, as we call it, going downtown, which means going to Hanoi. Everybody had their own way of relaxing, shaking off the scariness that's in front of them, reminding what they had to do, and memorizing everything involved. What I wanted to point out here, if you can see the survival vest he had on and everything attached to it. By the time you had the G suit on, helmet, survival guns, and everything else, it weighed out at 90 pounds. Now that's what the Air Force advertised. But everybody customized their own survival vest. I, for one, carried 2 radios instead of 1 and 3 extra batteries. That was our only means of survival on the ground. We carried a P-38 pistol. It wasn't much of anything, to be honest. It was more of a thought, because it wasn't going to do a whole lot of damage. We carried a whole lot of flares and other different things. The other major thing we carried is baby bottles of water. Back then, we didn't have the plastic bottles, so we had baby bottles filled with water that we carried in our flight suits. Because once you hit the ground, you're automatically thirsty because of what you've been through. So you take and drink 1 bottle of water, you try to save the other one as much as you can. There's the 105 starting. They started with either with a cart or a cartridge start. That's the instrument panel inside of 105. I've been away from it 50 some odd years, and it takes me a while to look and identify what it says. These are just short clips. The major thing I wanted to point out, this is the chaplain. No matter what time you were flying, no matter how many, he was always in the arming area at the end of the runway to bless the airplane and bless the pilots. Morning, noon, or night. It's still in the pre-flight. We're not pulling the red safety ribbons because they'll be pulled at the end of the runway. There's an EB-66 hooking up to air refueling off of KC-135, and we used the drogue. We had a hose at the end there, you can see that's flexible, and we hooked into that big dish, which was metal. The problem was when you're trying to hook into it due to turbulence, that dish would jump all around. So you have to figure out how the turbulence would affect that, and you come into the dish high, and as it jumped, you could plug in. And once you plugged in with a click, you could download and get your fuel. F-105, 500 miles from Hanoi, hitting the tanker. The 105 could air refuel 2 different ways. From the boom, as you see there, and the same as by the basket as I showed you earlier. In Thailand, we had 2 monsoon seasons, one from the east and one from the west. And in between, we had heat. In Southern California, you don't know what heat is. 120, 125 degrees in the afternoon. The 105s and the B-66s had to download fuel because they wouldn't be able to take off, and then hit a tanker right after takeoff because the heat just killed us. So we had a long runway. We had almost 10,000 feet of runway. You got used to the heat, but boy, it was bad. There's my wingman getting ready to hook up. I shot this through the cockpit of the 135 while I was refueling. In the early days, in the 65s, the B-66, because of its extremely good at radar, would lead the 105s in to drop over North Vietnam. And then as it got worse, there was no way you can do it because nothing over North Vietnam was safe because of the SAMs. There's another picture of them refueling. That, I believe, is on the way out because you can see the center line is empty. Here's an artist's drawing. All that smoke and stuff in the background is North Vietnam, and that's from the guns, the SAMs, and everything else. There were some days that we had smoke black, white, and blue, almost like saluting us. But the sky would be filled with it. There's a picture of, well, actually it's a drawing of 105 launching a Standard Arm missile. Well, you can tell this is a Wild Weasel because of the dual cockpit. What they did with the 105, they took and stretched it and put a second seat in for the electronic warfare officer, and that became a G model, and that's where the Eagle is. This is a MiG-17. Not a friend of mine, but that's what they mostly had. MiG-21, they had 21 of these. They very rarely engaged them. They only engaged them when they felt they were safe. They would come off, make a high-speed run, shoot, and run. And when they couldn't get off in time, the whole fleet would run to China. And of course, as you saw, we can't go to China. This is from Colonel Robinose, which was a famous flyer. He's probably got some stuff here in this museum. That was his comments when he was the wing commander of the 8th Fighter Wing. This might give you some better idea of what was encountered over North Vietnam. That's an SA-2 surface-to-air missile, radar control. Although if they got it close to you and lost radar, they could proximity fuse it. There's one coming off the launcher. That's what an SA-2 radar sight looks like. Here's the radar band that we try to knock out. These are all the missiles that are looking for guidance from the radar. You knock out that, those aren't going anywhere. But the better thing is you get explosion from this that would go through the skin of many of these missiles, and that skin was fairly thin. This is a closer look at the Van Song radar. This I appreciate if you read. You think it was treason? You think it was directed by the president? How about McNamara, who was Secretary of Defense? Do we owe a lot of our losses at different places due to this? What kind of war did we fight? That's just my thoughts. Okay, this is just a picture and a recap of some of the items we had to confront with. Of course, I talked about the SA-2 missile. The 57mm gun was a rapid fire, basically low altitude for us. The 85mm went up to over 30,000 feet, and scared us. And then they had 120mm also. And that's basically a surface gun. But they had so many of these that they were just all over. This is a ZSU-23. There's 4 high-volume machine guns here with the radar. And if you're down low and that locks onto you, you've got a problem. That's the gun sight of 105. You can see he got a hit with a missile. This is an artist's drawing of a 105 above a MiG-17. The 105 shot down 27 and a half MiGs compared to, I forgot how many DF-4s got. But remember, the 105's mission was to bomb, not to go after MiGs. But it was every pilot's desire to get a MiG kill. So you had to temper a lot of emotion. This is just some of the bombing. If you see all the bomb plots all over, between what we did and the B-52s. The B-52s, one plane would drop 104 500-pound bombs. And they would fly in cells of 3. So you had 300 plus bombs being dropped. There's some more of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And when it did, we ended up losing the war. But did we really fight a war? As I showed you on the map, these were targets we could not hit. Hanoi, Haiphong, Geelong, which was the international airport, 30 miles from the China border, Kep Air Base, which was in the northeast, and that's their fighter base, and then there were others. In Hanoi, there were 2 targets. If we bombed, we would put them out of commission. They had a dam full of water, and they had a power plant. A lot of the industry in Hanoi went underground. You break the dam, the water flows underground, and they're gone. You cut off their electricity. Can't do that. This is just a map of the curling of the Red River. This is one of my friends on his 96 mission. Those were a couple of his targets. This is what we saw going in. Vietnam is not a level place till you get close to the coastline. It's full of small mountains, very sharp, straight up. And when you're low level, you can really get an idea what it's all about. They built bridges underwater. We had a term that we were fragged to go out and shoot and bomb swaying bamboo bridges. And that's where the term came from. Can you see the bridge underwater there? And they could move trucks and troops and everything over those bridges, but from the air you couldn't see them. That's one of the crew members that was rescued. He's on a Jolly Green coming back. Here's some damage to 105 from AAA. On one of my missions, I came back and was short on fuel, so I landed at one of our sister bases, Karat. And there was a 105 parked way out on the base that had a missile stuck in the tailpipe, and they didn't want to do anything for fear it would blow up. Here he is bringing the 105 in back from a mission. This is a sort of a recap of what Vietnam was, when it took place, and December 72 was when it really started. And then we went in with B-52s and 105s and all the sorties. Then you get to 73 with the peace agreement that was signed by Kissinger. And then Watergate scandals, which took the emphasis away from the war. I'm sure most people here remember the Watergate scandal. And then we bring back the prisoners. This is a map from a B-52 of some of his targets and what they had to do. B-52s flew in at about 38,000 feet to try to be above most of the artillery and everything from the Vietnamese. That's me in my party uniform. This came about in June of 1967. It was determined that the fighter wings would all have practice tactical meetings every third month at a different fighter base. It was our turn at my base to have the meetings, so we docked up with our party suits. Every squadron had a different party suit. Ours was black with all the patches on, just like you would have at any party. This is one of the logos from one of the fighter squadrons. That was our logo to the Vietnamese. There's some of the vehicles we had that doctored up. That day was off. It was a big party day, so we had a big parade. There's some of my cohorts there standing in front. That's the wing commander. Welcoming, and he went on to be a two-star, by the way. He's welcoming all the other fighter squadrons in the parade that took place. We had tech reps dressed up as girls. We called them T-lots. But it was a fun time. It was a practice party. We didn't have the real party until all the POWs were back, and we had in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas treated everybody royally. This is a picture of the POWs coming back. Every POW had their own escort officer. The ones in the gray are the POWs, and then the ones in uniform are the escort officers. Every escort officer had a book with all the details of the POW they were escorting, from the day he was born to his family and everything else. And then they updated them on the news that took place while they were 5 and 6 years in prison. Now this is a flight from Hanoi to the Philippines, which was their first stop. Anyway, it felt good. I was honored enough to be on one of the missions that picked up the POWs. That's just an overlay of the 105 and over Vietnam. And I have to thank Colonel Jenkins, who was also there with me, who was the 105 Weasel pilot. And what's up? Now that's important to me, and as you can see, I do have on my shirt. Coming out of that Vietnam War, all of us that flew over the Red River started that practice we had, became the River Rats or Rats. And we all have logos, and we still have practice meetings or real meetings. That's it.